When it comes to societies in the past, we often see the dynamics of how they play out. Societies where stratification is present, and societies that have their own dependence on certain types of products. We can see this in how many of the colonial Caribbean economies were entirely reliant on cash crops, or even the economy of Sri Lanka and Malaya that exported tons of rubber. In pre-World War II Sugarlandia, a colloquial and slang term for the island of Negros, it can be seen in their own systems of plantations and haciendas, as well as their dependence on the cash crop of sugar, hence the name Sugarlandia. Disclaimer, okay, maybe I may have chosen the name Sugarlandia over its more formal term of Negros. Oh no. Specifically so YouTube does not destroy me and my soul, but yeah. Going back to Negros Island, which I will now use to replace the word Sugarlandia, it is particularly well known in the whole Philippines for its disproportionate abundance of haciendas, or plantations, with large portions or even a majority of the population in Negros working under the hacienda or plantation system. But first, to understand how such a stratified society developed in Negros, we have to take a brief look at the history of the island. The first people to settle the island were the Ata, a Negrito ethnic group distinct from the present-day Austronesian majority that currently inhabit not only Negros, but most of the Philippines. Little is known of the early pre-colonial history of Negros, with the records indicating that before the arrival of the Spanish in 1565, the island was called by the Hiligay non-ethnic group as Buglas, to describe the reeds that were once the predominant vegetation in the island. When the Spanish arrived, they called the island Negros to describe the dark-skinned inhabitants that they had encountered. Immediately following their takeover, Spanish soldiers were assigned their own encomiendas, a system that rewarded conquerors with the labors of conquered non-Christian peoples. The system stipulated that the encomenderos, or those in charge of encomiendas, were to protect the natives of the land while simultaneously Christianizing them. In turn, the natives were to provide labor and tribute to both the encomenderos and the Spanish crown. As you can most certainly tell, this system was rife with abuses, and can be touted as a form of communal slavery that was eventually abolished in most of the Philippines by the end of the 17th century, in turn being replaced by the repartimiento and eventually the hacienda system. The hacienda is a type of estate that functioned as either plantations, mines, or factories. Although many haciendas performed all of these activities together, in the Philippines, haciendas primarily took the form of agricultural plantations, and unlike their Latin American counterparts, where the haciendas were typically owned by the Criollos or Spaniards in the colonies, haciendas in the Philippines were primarily owned by the Spaniards and Chinese mestizos, with many having native ancestries. According to the historian Roque Pijo Filenia Jr., the entry of enterprising groups into Negros called for the demand of new towns and haciendas following various migrations of different groups of people. The first of these lands were acquired by the Spaniards in the 1830s, who came from their discontent due to the political problems of Spain, as well as the prospects of material fortunes coming from the rumored fertile lands of Negros. The second group, comprised of Chinese and Spanish mestizos, came during the 1860s as a result of the growing prospects of sugar trade, as opposed to their traditional source of income, which were the native textiles produced in the neighboring island of Panay, which were declining as a result of the cheaper British textile products that were entering the Philippine market. Accompanying the second group was the British Vice Consul Nicholas Loney, who introduced improvements to the technology and capital of the growing sugar industry. These improvements facilitated the migrations of farmers from Panay and Cebu to begin their work on the newly established haciendas, and with this newfound prosperity saw the creation of the many casas and villas that can be seen in the towns and haciendas of Negros today, such as the Balay ni Tanadikang, Balay Negrense, and Casa Grande. However, while many commend Nicholas Loney for helping establish the sugar industry in Negros and Panay, Columban priests label him as an assassin, promoting cheaper British cotton, which resulted in the death of Panay's textile industry, while strengthening the sugar industry, which led to the enrichment of an upper class while ensuring a life of perpetual poverty for the vast majority of people. With the decline of Spain and the short-lived independence of the Republic of Negros, established by the hacendero class, or those who owned haciendas, as well as the American occupation, resulted in newfound prosperity for the upper class, a result of the preferential entry of Philippine sugar to the American market. This lasted from the start of the American period until the Japanese invasion of the Philippines in 1941. This prosperity is reflected today, with most hacienda mansions, while stereotypically seen as a product of the Spanish period, were in fact only constructed during the American period. Examples are the Gaston Mansion in Hacienda Rosalia, the Infante House in Hacienda Guadalupe, and the Don Bernardino Halandoni House in Silay. At the heart of economic and social life in Negros was the hacienda. In contrast to the rest of the Philippines where the barrio locality was predominantly where rural Filipinos resided in, census data listed haciendas to be where most Negrenses resided in, living under the land of the hacenderos. Hacenderos were, for the most part, free to do whatever they wished in how they managed their plantations. The government rarely intervened as they saw it fit that what was more important was agricultural expansion. Likewise, the clergy, for the most part, sided with the hacenderos in almost all matters, as they depended on the donations and generosity of the hacenderos to maintain their lifestyles. In this manner, Negro society was akin and similar to the American antebellum South, or the West Indies plantation societies, with the unchallenged and unrestricted planter class. Negros had two general class distinctions: the upper class, made up by the hacenderos, clergy, businessmen, and the government, with the lower class made up by farmers and sacadas, or seasonal farmers, who tilled the land. The upper class typically lived in the various mansions and houses throughout the island, a testament to the prosperity gained from the sugar industry, while the farmers and sacadas were often in settlements far into the fields, or near the mansions, to serve as labor whenever the hacenderos needed such. While the difference in the two may be perceived to have cross physical properties and facial features, such as the hacendero or planter class having more Spanish, Chinese, or other foreign ancestries, compared with the more native-looking farmers, this difference was not as extreme as compared to the American white planters and the black laborers and farmers. Yet these differences were nevertheless visible to many that documented the social dynamics of Negros at the time. Culturally, Negros was heavily influenced by Spanish customs, culture, and religion.
El Señor es contigo. Bendita tú eres entre todas las mujeres y bendito es el fruto.
This was especially seen in the upper class, with Spanish held at high prestige, used extensively in business, religion, literature, and even day-to-day conversations.
No está bien cocinado. Le falta aceite de oliva.
Common Spanish phrases were also frequently used, with these having been understood not only by the upper class, but by the lower class as well.
Ahora mismo.
¿Qué pasa? Cállate, nena. No te metas.
Santísima Madre de Dios, Josefina.
English at this time had yet to encroach and replace Spanish, although it was present and growing especially with the younger generations, with Spanish losing more and more ground as the years progressed. The upper class also valued Western products, vehicles, architecture, furniture, and cuisine. This is obvious considering that Negros was a former Spanish colony, yet this infatuation only persisted and even strengthened under American rule, because of the interactions with Spaniards and Americans through the industry, and intermarriage, especially with the first group. Life in general was leisurely for the upper class. With their newfound wealth in the sugar trade, they frequently mingled socially and politically with the creme de la creme of Philippine society. Hacenderos were also noted for their indulgence in large mansions, gambling, religious processions, automobiles, and an overall extravagant lifestyle. A scene from the movie Oro Plata Mata depicting the dynamics of hacienderos and farmers living through World War II shows that even with the war going on just outside their hacienda, the upper class were busy leisureling to mahjong while a servant painstakingly cracks open watermelon seeds, while they go on gambling and trying to relieve themselves as if life carried on without war directly affecting them. For the lower class made up of farmers and sacadas, life was not so rosy. Once on plantations, they were often bound for life. Local authority, justices, and town officials were often selected by or from the upper class, creating a legal system of domination for the sugar elite. Runaway workers could be jailed for debt and returned to their previous haciendas. With this indebtedness and lack of alternative means of livelihood, workers were bound to their haciendas. Work in the haciendas was often repetitious, dangerous, and physically rigorous to the farmers. Coupled with the extremely low wages that they received as a result of the need for the hacenderos to compete with global industries such as the European beet sugar, as well as the Philippines' own problem that their yields per hectare were some of the lowest in the world. With little to no social mobility, low wages, and a rigorous and backbreaking type of labor, life was pretty hard for the average farmer in Negros. However, even with these rosy and drab lives of many in peacetime Negros, from the extravagant lives of the upper-class hacenderos and officials to the bleak lives of many farmers and sacadas, a result of the systems at play, the factors and circumstances involved in the system of the haciendas and Negros created the system of domination and control for the sugar elite, controlling virtually all aspects of social, political, and economic life using their wealth garnered from the sugar trade. These eventually led to the gradual heightening of tensions between both classes, with eventual confrontations by the end of the American period, and the eventual outbreak of World War II.